Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
You know, recruiting top elite talent, regulatory quality talent in the medical device industry, it's tough, man. It is really tough, and it's vitally important. It's important to us at Greenlight Guru as we grow our team and our product and the customers that we support. And I know it's tough for many of you who might be listening to the Global Medical Device Podcast. So I'm really excited about this episode where I get a chance to chat further with Mitch Robbins from the Anthony Michael Group. We explore some RAQA recruiting myth and enjoy this episode of the Global Medical Device Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast. This is your host, the founder and VP of Quality and Regulatory at Greenlight Guru, Jon Speer. You know, it's an interesting time of year. It's just an interesting time of year. We'll just leave it at that. But at the same time, I think it's a good interesting because there's so much demand for quality and regulatory resources in the medical device industry. I know here at Greenlight Guru, we're growing. We're looking to add gurus to our team with strong med device quality and regulatory experience. And I've been working with a gentleman by the name of Mitch Robbins. Mitch is the managing director at the Anthony Michael Group. Mitch, welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast.
Thanks, John. Always a pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and I mentioned I'm working with you because, I've got you, you're doing some really great work for us in finding really great folks to fill some of our internal needs. And I know you and I have had a chance to chat a couple times in the past on the Global Medical Device Podcast. And the reason that I'm always intrigued to have a chance to talk to you is you have really good content. You have a really good perspective on the pulse of the medical device industry. So I guess I'm curious, share with folks, I think I've told folks before on Global Medical Device Podcast episodes where you've been a guest that you just operate differently than other recruiters. And I get that this is probably your secret sauce or your competitive advantage, but I'll throw this up for you. Why do you care so much about, why do you invest so much time, effort, and energy to really understand this?
Probably the same reason you invest so much time and energy into Greenlight Guru and into your team. It's a passion of mine. And I think, I operate on the philosophy of let's try and provide as much value as possible at any turn. And whether folks work with us directly or not, or they glean stuff from my content that could be useful, it's a passion of mine to help organizations build elite teams and watch candidates have the opportunity to take roles that they more than often weren't even expecting to come across their desk and completely change their lives for the better. It's been a passion of mine for over a decade now.
Yeah, and that's been sort of the spirit of previous conversations that you and I have had on the Global Medical Device Podcast. And I thought we could do, a kind of the next version of that, if you will, and focusing a little bit on kind of the hiring side of things and maybe some do's and do nots that hiring managers and med tech leaders should be focusing on. From my perspective, there are some absolutes, and I realize as you and I've talked that this isn't necessarily how a lot of people hire folks. So, as you've talked with med tech leaders or observed med tech leaders, what are some of the gotchas that you've seen? I mean, what are some of the big mistakes that you see people making when they're trying to hire talent?
Yeah. I think today it'd be great that, I really call it the 5 myths of recruiting elite med tech technical talent, and we can kind of break down each one of them. But you're going to have to bear with me because I might get fired up.
That's okay. Go for it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that we're working together and helping you build out your team, and you were talking about some of the success we're having, and I want to attribute one of the primary reasons to you being so invested up front in being really a gateway to the talent that gets to be interviewed with Greenlight Guru and have conversations with. And then also just the time you've invested to really be able to help us flush out the employer value proposition. What's in it for someone right now who's doing the very similar job elsewhere? Why should they stop dead in their tracks and at least be compelled enough to have an exploratory conversation with you? And so one of the biggest myths out there is that recruiting isn't necessarily the hiring manager's responsibility. It's HR or talent acquisition. I see way too many hiring managers, heads down, focused on, other tasks that of course they're responsible for, meetings with health authorities or audits or dealing with submission deadlines. I get it. But I just feel like waiting for talent to come to them is a huge mistake and ends up causing so much havoc on the back end. And so I'm kind of break some of the things down. I often hear, when we are talking with new prospective clients, I hear things like HR's taking care of the recruitment process, or, HR handles all recruiting firms and they kind of tell us who to work with. And I don't get involved until HR sends us resumes. And the analogy that I would use is consider a baseball general manager whose main role, probably more than any other sport, is to really field a championship caliber team. And his job pretty much 100% depends on the real world performance of the team he fields. So obviously it's incumbent that he attracts, selects, and signs the very best talent possible at each different position. Can you imagine if the general manager didn't get involved with the recruiting process and own those hiring decisions? So I feel like it's ludicrous to not be involved early on in the process and really help talent acquisition or HR or the third-party recruiting firm truly understand how is this person going to impact the organization as a whole, the department, and most importantly, think about this: the fundamental element of being a leader is having the ability to field a team of top performers. It just is, because ultimately your boss and the organization hold you accountable for the outcomes that come out of your department, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I every possible candidate that we're looking at Greenlight to add to our customer success team, the gurus, if you will, I screen every one of those resumes before anybody else. No one else sees those resumes before I have a pretty good feel about it. And in fact, even after the resume, I'm the first point of contact. I do an initial phone screen. What I'm looking for on a resume is certainly, that's important, right? And I guess this is a tip that I would give folks out there who may be looking for career opportunities. If you have spelling errors on your resume, I'm probably not going to read it any further. If there's just typos and things like that, it's just probably if you didn't put enough time into the quality of your resume, then I'm probably not going to put a lot of time into going to that next step. So I know that sounds a little harsh, but there's a lot of things coming across my plate, and I'm invested in the hiring and the recruiting process. So I want to make sure that the time that I'm investing are the people that at least took quality and put it front and center and presented their best case. So that resume is very important, and I'll come back to that here in a moment. But I had a funny story the other day, Mitch. I asked them to send me their resume after I met them at an event or something, and I don't have a resume. It's like, oh, come on, please. I mean, are you seeing a lot of that people are candidates are saying, oh, I don't have a resume? Is that a thing these days?
It's funny you bring that up, because that's happened to us twice in the last week for a role that we're recruiting on. But these people had been with the same company for the last 17 years. However, what I would say is I think it's vital because you never know when an opportunity is going to come up that somebody taps you on the shoulder for, right? I think it's vital. There's so many templates out there that you can easily grab from the internet and give you a framework, and take the opportunity, take the time to make it a living, breathing document on a weekend or something, so that if you ever need it, it's right there.
Yeah, agreed. I know maybe some people may be saying this is crazy what I'm about to say. I keep my resume updated all the time, and I'm not looking for anything. It's just who's to say 3 years from now I can remember the really cool, awesome things that I'm doing today? I'm not. So I use that I refresh the resume every 60 to 90 days or so, and I just keep it current, keep it up to date. I think it is bragging a little bit, but you should brag because if you're proud of what you did, then you should have, this is your story as a candidate, and that story's got to be compelling to the people that might be looking to hire somebody with your background. So tell a good story. I mean, I'm not saying make things up, but make sure your story is compelling and relevant to the opportunities that you're exploring.
And I'll throw in one more thing, as long as we're talking about resumes, that might help listeners. So many resumes are basically a alphabet soup resume of
yes.
responsibilities, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Technical language, anything that they think are hot buttons is going to catch an algorithm in a computer that's going to scan the resume, or that is going to impress a hiring manager because they have the hot button on. What is going to set you apart from somebody doing the exact same job down the street are the outcomes that you've been able to deliver as a result of your responsibilities.
Amen.
So I always tell people, summarize 2, if not 3 sentences of what is the scope of your role, and then use bullet points to really, for the meat of your resume, to discuss where you've either made money, saved money, improved a process, whatever it may be that your role is responsible for. What are the outcomes that you've been able to deliver? That's what's going to set you apart.
Absolutely, and that's a really important point. So, as a hiring manager, as you're looking for med tech talent to add to your team, that's what you're looking for, and maybe that's part of the reason why some med tech leaders are like, let HR handle it, because they don't want to filter through, the BS, the alphabet soup. So, folks, if you're looking for opportunities, tell a compelling story, and make sure your resume doesn't look like the pile of other resumes that are coming across HR people and hiring managers' desk. Make it compelling, make it intriguing.
So I'm going to get fired up here because I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah, I know you are.
We're talking about resumes. We're talking about, HR and hiring managers not getting involved early enough in the process. You have to realize HR and talent acquisition, it's not their fault. They are responsible for so many different aspects of the business. Even if it's just solely recruiting that they're responsible for, they have the entire organization to worry about. So they can't be the domain expert like you are as the hiring manager. That's why when you're frustrated that HR is passing you along resumes because they have the right keywords or they meet the right qualifications that the job description says, but then you realize, man, these people they're nowhere close to what we're looking for. It's your own fault. You need to get involved early on. You need to help build out a performance profile. What indicators of past performance will help indicate future success on your team? Really flush that out. In my opinion, the hiring manager, with the demand in today's marketplace for regulatory and quality talent, there is absolutely, in my book, it's a mandatory must that the hiring manager should really be the first call. And here's why. Not only can you vet out the technical acumen, but you really need to be having your courting hat on too. There's too much competition out there. So if you can get into a conversation and help explain the value proposition of coming to your organization, what is the person going to be exposed to? What are they going to have the opportunity to be a part of project-wise? What does the growth trajectory look like for them? Those are the things that really get somebody fired up, and then let HR do their job to help with the rest of the screening process. Yeah. That's my opinion.
No, I agree. I mean, that's one of the things that I like to talk to potential candidates first, because I want to understand, what they're all about. And of course, we've got a job description, but a job description is a collection of words, and there's so much about what you're trying to convey that you're doing at your company that's special that sometimes it doesn't really find that emotion, that energy, that passion. It's hard to get that in words in a job description. So I want to be the person that kind of sets that foundation with a candidate who may be looking at Greenlight Guru as a stop in their career, because I want them to understand what we're doing here is special. It's different. It's awesome. It's amazing. And I want to, see, does this person have an opportunity to contribute to what we're doing, our growth and the opportunities that we have here. So you get a lot from a conversation. And for me personally, that once I review a resume and I say, hey, Mitch, I want to talk to this person, that first conversation that I have with a candidate is probably about 30 minutes. And I'll give you my own perspective. I'm not saying this is an absolute. I know that if a person, after that first conversation with me, if, I feel like there's some opportunity. And then I pull in other people from my team for a more in-depth, down in the weeds. Can this person, do they have the technical chops? Can this person do the day-to-day? I'm just trying to figure out, is this person have passion, enthusiasm, excitement, energy? Can they be part of the vision of our group? Can they be part of the vision of our company? That's what I'm trying to assess in that first 30 minutes. So there is an investment of time, and I agree with you. It's not only my responsibility, I think it's my obligation to my company to be so involved early and often throughout the process.
And I think that's why we're really building a great relationship, because you just get it. You get it. And, I think what is happening so often is that people think, well, they want to come work here, so, they're just kind of go through our process. And it's not that way. They can go to any number, especially in regulatory and quality functions. They can go to any organization they want for the most part if they're good. There's that much competition. So it really has to be a process. And who better to sell what the vision is and what the opportunity is than the person that's running the show? And how much credibility does it lend when you're willing to invest that time up front versus putting them through, an HR screening process that's really not going to be able to articulate the way you can?
As you were mentioning that, I was thinking back to a point many years ago where I found myself in a need to find a new job opportunity because, unfortunately, at the time I was let go from the place that I was working, and I had a young family and a mortgage and car payments and all that stuff, and I didn't have much of a nest egg, frankly, to fall back on. So it wasn't like I could be, and I didn't get a severance package, so it wasn't like I could be without work for a period of time. So, fortunately, I had a few opportunities, but the one I ended up taking, I'll be honest, it did raise a lot of red flags because I didn't talk to the actual hiring manager until step 3 or 4 in the process. The people that I were talking to is like the HR people. They were just, asking me the standard fair questions, and it was very cookie cutter. It was very checkbox oriented, and I ended up taking the job, and I knew when I was doing it that there were lots of red flags about that position, and I was right with the red flags. Within about 9 months, it's like, this isn't the place that I want to be. Which is wasn't fun for me as the person who was taking an next position, and I'm sure it wasn't good for that company either, because now they had to go fill another role. So this is important. Finding good people, recruiting talent, growing talent, all those sorts of things. It's an investment, and you don't have to go through this perpetually.
There's no doubt, and I think that really leads into kind of what we're alluding to is the second myth, which is I have no time to recruit elite talent. And I want to make a point. I think HR and talent acquisition play a vital, vital part. I always tell organizations the best recruitment process is a triangular relationship, especially if it's either a dual relationship internally between talent acquisition and HR if your company is big enough to have a department in addition to the executive or the hiring manager, or if you're utilizing a third-party headhunter, it's a triangular relationship between all three, because I think each one plays a vital function. But I often, the other myth is I have no time, and it's an insidious trap, and one that most leaders of technical functions face every day, which is usually why they pass the buck to HR and talent acquisition. It's I have no time because I don't have the right people on my team, but I don't have the time to hire the right people for my team. And, I think what happens is, these leaders end up spending a large chunk of their time instead of spending a decent amount of time recruiting and attracting high caliber talent, they end up spending their time micromanaging, or I guess to be real, babysitting, average performers. And in my opinion, I really think that 20, if not 30% of the time should be spent on recruitment and development of your team. And it sounds impossible, but think about this. If you have the opportunity or you make the sacrifice to give time up front and really develop an elite team, your work becomes so much more streamlined, and you're going to have so much more time in your day. And I think, again, to make the point again, the mark of a strong leader is not micromanagement and hard work. It's really a strong team, plain and simple. It really is.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I ain't got time for that. You know, what's important to me is people who are self-starters, people who have drive, people who are passionate, people that can move forward with a little bit of guidance and direction, but, you know, they're just able to kind of do it, you know, and, you know, there's a lot of things that when you're as a hiring manager, that when you're having conversations with folks, I mean, you kind of, the sooner you're involved with that process, you know, the easier it is to vet or flesh some of those things out. And it actually helps you better inform the next steps in your process. Like, oh, wow, there was something here that I uncovered, or that raised a mini flag or an alarm that we should probe into a little bit more. I mean, like you and I, you know, every time you bring someone to my put somebody in front of me, you and I talk very candidly about that, and you know, well, let's this is a red flag, or this is an area, and that sort of thing. And then, you know, I get a chance to talk to the person, and, you know, I can either prove or disprove some theories that I had, and formulate some new ones. And, you know, after I talk to the person, I'll say, hey, Mitch, I'm a little concerned about this thing. And you're able to do a little bit of additional research and conversations with the candidate. And so it becomes a really great partnership. But, yeah, I mean, who better? This is a person that's going to report to you and your team. You better have a really good understanding of how this person fits into the equation as soon as possible. You know, and you're trying to be, yes, I know you're busy. And to Mitch's earlier point, I know you got a lot of meetings and submissions and ISO certifications and all these things that you're trying to do. But a little bit of your investment up front is going to save a lot of time, effort, energy, and cycles from everybody involved in your hiring process if you just invest a little bit of that time on the front end. Yeah, I mean, to sum it up, it's short-term pain for long-term gain, right? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So you have, I think we've covered a couple of the myths. I guess before we dive too much deeper, I want to remind folks I'm talking to Mitch Robbins. Mitch is the managing director of the Antony Michael Group. If you've heard Mitch and I chat on the Global Medical Device podcast before, then you know how I feel about him. And if you haven't, let me remind or share that with you. He's been the most engaged, finger on the pulse, a recruiter for the medical device industry that I've ever crossed paths with. He is very invested in making sure that he's bringing the right opportunities, the right candidates to Greenlight Guru, because, you know, he doesn't want to waste my time. He doesn't want to waste his time. So, you know, we've had a lot of calibrating conversations along the way. And I can tell you, as he and I are speaking right now, we've got some really solid candidates that have come into the queue, and Mitch, I'm hoping that at least one of those candidates turns into a new hire for Greenlight here in the very, very near future. Yeah, I do the same, and I just want to say I really, really appreciate the relationship that you and I have been building along the way. I have nothing but the utmost respect for you personally, but also what you guys are doing at Greenlight, and it's our honor to be helping you build your team. Yeah, absolutely. You said something a moment ago about elite. You know, elite is one of those ambiguous terms, and you know, at the same time, I think that's what we all aspire, is to have elite teams and elite team members and that sort of thing. I think this is a myth that I can see elite, an elite person when I see it. I mean, how can one possibly know elite when they see it? Yeah, it's interesting. So I think so many executives feel like they have this gut instinct that they just have this, basically that they can trust their gut, that when it's right, it's right. But it's really, when you look at stats, it's not the case. 50%, it's like 48, if not all the way up to 50% now of all hires are mishires. And Whoa, sorry. I don't want to leave that too soon. So say that one more time. Yep. So that's staggering research, and I can back it up with where this research comes from. But almost 50%, as it stands today, of all hires are mishires. That's crazy. That's crazy. Not only that, but then think about this: for those that aren't classified as mishires, only a small percentage of those would be considered unqualified successes in their role, or in other words, like we're talking about, elite. So
the numbers don't lie. Our gut instincts, at least when it comes to hiring, really do tend to be wrong most of the time. And let me try and clarify why we think that is. Gut instinct is really the confluence of two byproducts of evolutionary lineage, and what it boils down to is what we call affinity bias and confirmation bias. And affinity bias is really the tendency to warm up to people that are like ourselves. And confirmation bias is the tendency for people to seek out information that really confirms those pre-existing assumptions. So what happens is most of us will make an initial assumption about a candidate within the first few minutes of meeting them. And it's, that we'll usually react positively if they ask and perhaps talk like ourselves. And then we'll spend the rest of the interview unconsciously trying to confirm that initial assumption. And it's human nature. We all tend to do this. And we do this at the expense, though, of really using an objective set of measures to assess candidates. And so, the myth is I know elite talent when I see it. It's just not the case. And the numbers show it.
Yeah, that stat is staggering. And, it's, I think it leads to further support for a hiring manager to be integrally involved, because elite talent isn't going to ooze out of a resume. I can write a fantastic resume and you might talk to me and you might say, wow, this guy just doesn't get it, So yeah, you're not going to know when you see it. And I think one other thing, it's not necessarily your myth, but I often have to remind my team that I think it's my job, my duty, and I think it's our team's duty when we're interviewing candidates that we've got to try to push some buttons. And I'm not trying to I'm trying to choose my language properly here for the podcast audience. I'm not just trying to be a contrarian or a pain, but every person I talk to, the first conversation, I try to talk them out of it. I try to paint an accurate picture about how hard it is to work here and that this isn't for everybody. And I, encourage and coach my team that get to the root of the issue, because when people are interviewing and they're going through that process, this is their best behavior. And you want to find out what they're, within legally, don't mishear me, but you got to find out, what things are just going to be problems and challenges during that interview process. You have to try to uncover that, because nothing is worse than hiring somebody, going through the best behavior phase, if you will, during the interview process. And then, a few months into the job, you ask the person to do something that you believe is perfectly within the scope of the job that you hired them for. And all of a sudden you find out, oh, wow, they're not equipped to do this. Or, oh, wow, they've got a bad attitude about this. Try to find that out during the interview process.
It's amazing how this conversation is just flowing. So everything that we're talking about today, John, is really based on a book or a mega guide that I co-wrote with a colleague of mine. It's called The Pathway to Recruit, Hire, Onboard, and Retain Elite Technical Talent. It's a no-cost, no obligation guide for the industry, where it's really a tell-all from the very first look all the way through the very first day and beyond. And what's interesting about what you just said about getting them on board and realizing, hey, this isn't the person who showed up is not the person that we interviewed.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about in this guide is the test drive. The very last phase of the interview process is to put them in a real life scenario, give them an opportunity to demonstrate their skill set in a real life scenario to validate, can they do this job? We go into much more detail, but it's the epitome of really one last time trying to vet out, is this person the real deal, or is it just a face in the interview?
Yeah, folks, you can find this guide that Mitch mentioned by going to theanthonymicrogroup.com/elite talent. As he mentioned, it's free. We'll also include a link to that and the text that accompanies this podcast. All right, so Mitch, kind of working through the next myth. I find elite talent, I uncover it. Then what? What is the next myth around elite talent?
So there's this idea that you can't get the elite talent to work there, and a lot of companies maybe don't feel like they can compete with the major billion-dollar organizations, or maybe they don't have enough sexy things to offer because they're in whatever phase developments that they're in. Maybe they just don't feel like they have the confidence to hire high performers who can go elsewhere. And I would say you can, as long as you break the mold that I see many technical leaders falling into, and that's really the following. One is relying on boilerplate job postings. Keep in mind that here's a couple stats for you. So at any given point, the marketplace, the employment marketplace as a whole, at any given point, roughly 32% of people are actively looking, meaning they're looking at job boards and they're actively trying to find a position. But when somebody goes to a job posting, only 3% end up applying, but they're applying after only 76 seconds of looking at the job posting. This is why you get roofers applying for directors of regulatory affairs.
Oh, my goodness. I had no idea, but it totally makes sense. Yeah.
So these are real stats. So keep in mind, so 32% of the marketplace active. This is not medical device. This is the entire employment market. Okay. So it's probably even less in medical device, but let's use that stat. That means that there's roughly 70% of people who aren't even out there looking. There's another stat that says up to 80% of people at any given time are at least open-minded to an opportunity if it was going to be an enhancement to what they're doing today. They're at least open to hearing about it. But they're not necessarily actively looking. So when you're dealing with such a finite pool of people who are actually looking at your job postings, it begs the question, why are we using these boilerplate job postings that all we do is talk about requirements and responsibilities, right? And so really leveraging an opportunity to tell your story, put together an employer value proposition that is not subpar, tell your story. What's in it for them? Why would they join Greenlight Guru? What's going on with the company? If they do come in and do a great job, what does that look like? What would they have to deliver on to be considered a high performer? If they do deliver, what's in it for them as far as growth? So really flushing that piece out as far as your employer value proposition. And then when it comes to the hiring process, really understanding you can't hire somebody, a B or C player, the way you hire an A player. If you've got somebody who you have identified to be a potential elite performer, what are you doing to court that person? What are you doing to expedite the onboarding process? And how are you rolling out the carpet once they are there? Mm-hmm. Because the truth is, you might fool them at the beginning, but once they get them on board and they realize, oh boy, this isn't what I thought it was, but there's some issues, right?
Yeah. There's so many good nuggets in there. I mean, it's, and I guess, looking at it from my lens, some of the things that I look at, I mean, of course, I want the most elite talent that I can possibly get. And even with that, I'm also looking for sort of the unproven or the diamond in the rough, so to speak. Somebody that maybe is on this career path that they haven't achieved their greatness yet. I want bringing elite talent to your organization is one thing, but bringing an elite resource to your team in an environment where they can become even more elite than what they already are, I think is even more important.
Correct. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
But elite talent's so expensive, Mitch. How in the world could I afford elite talent?
You know what? This is probably one of the biggest myths out there. I can unequivocally say that money is not the number one consideration for elite candidates. Now let me qualify that. Money is certainly important to top talent. It's important to everybody. And you can't expect the best of the best to work for peanuts. But there's multiple studies out there that have shown that top talent really are driven by something much deeper than numbers on their W-2. And they're driven by what we call self-actualization. And it's funny, you and I were having a brief conversation before the podcast. We were, in essence, talking about this very thing. Self-actualization is really the opportunity for somebody to stretch, for somebody to be challenged, for somebody to constantly be able to be in a position to grow, not be stagnant, not be stifled. That's really what drives elite talent. And I think you would agree. We were literally just talking about this, about fostering an environment where if somebody's got a lot of horsepower and they want to run, give them an opportunity to run.
Yeah. I'm just going to chime in. I mean, I want people who are not complacent. I want people who are hungry. I want people who they want to know what opportunities there are, even if they're not fully vetted and defined. I mean, I want people who are hungry and have this appetite to take our organization, which I have a strong bias, but I believe is pretty good, and make it even better. And I want that's what I want to try to uncover during that interview process. I want to be truthful and accurate about how difficult and challenging and all those sorts of things, and get see the stars in their eyes and how excited they are, and I want to hear their ideas. Well, what if you did this? What if you did that? Because that sort of thing just is going to make our culture even better than what it already is.
And I want to hammer this a little bit further. So there's a guy out there that I respect, Dr. Brad Smart. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he wrote a book called Top Grading. And don't quote me on the specific amount, but it's right around, he claims that it's right around 13 times, the cost of a mishire is right around 13 times a leader's salary. Okay? By the time you add in direct and indirect costs. And so while you may have to pay a little bit of a premium for top talent, think about the savings from not having a mishire derail your team, or from not having to hire outside consultants to fix a mishire's mistake. Think about it as basically an upfront investment in a team of elite performers. How is that not the safest and most profitable investment?
I think if we were just looking at this as a dollar and cents thing, I mean, we're not, especially in the medtech space, especially in the niche of quality and regulatory people, we're not looking for commodity people. And so if talent's going to cost me, on the balance sheet a little bit more. Okay, if you're kind of down in the weeds looking at the just purely the dollars and cents, then maybe this advice isn't for you. But to me, I'm looking at the upside. It's like, okay, yes, this person is going to come at a maybe a little bit more premium than I had in mind, and what are the upside opportunities? Because I think that's really important, because I don't have time. You want to talk about the things that I don't have time to do. I don't have time to be perpetually in a hiring process. I don't have time to continually screen resumes over and over and over. I don't have time to interview candidates over and over and over again. And if I don't invest the time hiring the right resources, the right kind of talent, the right kind of team members on the front end, then 6, 12, 18 months later, guess what? I'm going to be doing it again. And I think your statistics corroborate that if you make a bad hire, you're just going to be doing this again in about a year's time.
Right. And it's really the theme of everything that we're saying is, there's upfront sacrifice you have to make. You're probably going to work harder to keep up with the all the responsibilities you do have. And you are going to be investing time, but it's going to save you so much on the back end. And what I see just time and time again is hiring managers just hiring from what's available because they're desperate to get somebody in. Yeah. A qualified resume got passed over to them. They make the decision when they could have gotten involved so much earlier in the process and had a much better opportunity of having a more confident, thought out hire, in my opinion.
Totally. I mean, and I know we at Greenlight have been there before. We had the position that we're looking to hire, and I'm glad that you and I crossed paths. I'll have to look back and maybe you remember how that even happened to begin with. But anyway, before that, I mean, we had job postings that were open for a long time. And in the meantime, while we're trying to hire somebody, the amount of work that continued to pile up, it wasn't getting smaller, it was getting bigger. So we were at a point where we had some candidates, and not everybody was on board, but at the same time, the work was there, and it was increasing, not decreasing. And the knee-jerk reaction was, well, let's just make the hire to help ease the burden of the work a little bit. And thankfully, people on the team like, whoa, that's not what we do around here. And the whole team was on board with this. Like, we'd rather take extra time. We'd rather take on additional workload because we want to make sure we get the right people to our team. And because we all knew, we're all invested in this culture at Greenlight, and we all know that we haven't, I'll be honest, we haven't in this company, we haven't always had. Sometimes we haven't made great hires, or we've brought people onto the team that haven't always been a great fit. It happens. Okay, you're not going to be perfect, but think about the cost to your culture, the cost to your organization, the cost of your time, and so on and so forth when you don't make good hiring decisions. So, thankfully I've got a good team. We all keep each other in check, and we're like, no, we're going to take our time. We're going to bring the right person in. The work that's on our plate that's piling up is going to be there. It's going to grow, and that cannot be an influence in our hiring process.
Absolutely. And to your question, yeah, we met. I reached out to you to be a guest on our podcast. I was so fond of what you were doing. I had you come on to RAQA,
and then right.
RAQA today, and then you told me about what was going on with the team. But, to your point, I just, I respect how much time you invest up front, how much, I guess, that you are transparent with your own organization of what it means to bring somebody into your culture and how protective you guys are of what you are building there, and making sure that you take your time to vet out, and recognizing that the upfront time can save so much headache on the back end. And I just feel blessed that I've met you, and we continue to be able to partner together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mitch, I know we've covered a lot of ground today, and I have a feeling that here in maybe a couple of weeks, you and I will have other things to talk about. So why don't we do this? Why don't we put a wrapper on this episode of the Global Medical Device Podcast, and let's put a pin in an opportunity to talk about other stuff related to medtech and quality and regulatory on an upcoming episode real soon.
That sounds great, Jon. Thanks again for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Folks, once again, I've been talking with Mitch Robbins with the Anthony Michael Group. If you are looking for an opportunity in the medtech industry, or you're looking for people to add to your team, I would highly encourage you to contact Mitch and the team at the Anthony Michael Group. It's very easy. Go to theanthonymichaelgroup.com, all one word, and you can contact them. And I'll provide a link to the guy that Mitch mentioned earlier, but I want to thank him for all the work that he does for Greenlight, but also all the work that he does for the industry, because I think it's really, really good stuff. So check out his blog, check out his podcast. He's got some videos on LinkedIn, and I think on YouTube as well. So really, really good stuff. If you're hiring or looking for opportunities, there's some really good nuggets of information. Folks, I also want to remind you, yes, Greenlight Guru, we do have an EQMS software solution that's designed specifically for the medical device industry and only for the medical device industry. And yes, it was designed by actual medical device professionals, people who have worked in this space for a long, long time. So if you want the only medical device EQMS software solution on the market today, then go to www.greenlight.guru to learn more about our award-winning platform. And if you're so inclined, click the button that says request a demo, and somebody from our team will love to talk to you and learn about your quality management system needs and see if there might be some way that we can help, especially with all of these changes that are coming with EU MDR and 14971 and so on and so forth. So again, go to www.greenlight.guru to learn more. As always, thank you so much for listening to the Global Medical Device Podcast. This is your host, founder, and VP of Quality and Regulatory at Greenlight Guru, Jon Speer.